Welcome to the Paradise Paradox. So today I'd like to present an interview to you with my good friend Bobaphet, talking about some interesting experiences that he's had over the course of his life. So he starts off giving us a little history, talking about growing up, traveling around, growing up in different places like Ireland and Singapore as the son of a British intelligence officer. Later, he talks about how he joined the army and they tried to tighten his mind a little bit and squeeze out the creativity and imagination which he previously had, and how that helped him learn to recognize brainwashing and propaganda when he encountered it outside the Navy. Later, he joined certain magical organizations such as a Church of Wicca in Australia, and also the OTO, or Ordo Templi Orientis, the Order of the Eastern Temple. And he talks about the lessons that he learned from them, also about the Church of Scientology, which he was also involved with for some years. So remember, you can follow Bob on Steemit. If you go steemit.com/@Bobaphet, Bobaphet. You can also check out my new project, which is Cryptonomics, focused on the principles of cryptocurrency and investing. So you can search for that, Cryptonomics, on Facebook, Cryptonomics on YouTube, also on Steemit at Cryptonomics1. So let's get into it. Welcome, Bob. So Bob is a friend of mine, and he's been involved in various unusual organizations over the years. And it's kind of funny because you don't talk about it a whole lot. And when I suggested it to you, like talking about it on Steemit or whatever, you didn't seem that interested. It seemed like you thought that people wouldn't be receptive. But I think it's more interesting than you realize. Yeah.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Yes. So tell me, which of these unusual organizations have you been a member of?
Unusual organizations. What's unusual?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say, but some magical organizations and religious organizations.
Well, I've always been chasing religion, I guess, just out of curiosity. I was fortunate enough, like even as a kid, I tried all the local Sunday schools, Jehovah's Witnesses. Parents weren't into any of it themselves, but they had no problem with me. So I went to Watchtower meetings, and I was always sort of looking, always asking questions, and discovering that no one really had answers. So the bastions of the answers weren't really answers. It was just, they were just repeating the same mantras, if you like, or
well, it's like they had the words, but they didn't fully comprehend them.
Exactly, yeah. They were just regurgitating what they'd been told, but with probing questions, it was pretty obvious that they really didn't know, and it was just awkward for them, I guess, to try and explain something that they didn't understand when all they had was a script, I guess.
Yes.
It's like, when you're dealing with a call center and you deviate from their script, especially when it's like technical support or something for the internet or whatever, like, and they're going off this script and you just can't deviate from it. And I found it was exactly the same thing when asking deep probing questions, the philosophy of life.
Yeah.
So going off the script, they were just lost.
Right. Yeah, it's really funny too, because people can seem very confident when they know what the script is, but as soon as you get off it, things start to fall apart, and you see this other face.
Yeah, and I got it at school. On my school reports, it was like, Robert is a distraction in class. It was like, yet they can't answer my questions. That's a distraction.
Yeah. So did you ever get kicked out of Sunday school?
No, but I did. There was not like school reports, but there was like feedback, I guess, because under the age of 12, I guess, up to about 12, is your parents are fed back how you went. And it was always the same sort of thing. I was always considered to be disruptive because I just wouldn't accept the status quo answers. And the further I probed, the further I discovered that no one actually had answers.
That's interesting too, because not a lot of people at that age would take the responsibility to seek answers like that. So do you remember what
it's always very inquisitive. I mean, like as a young child, before we came to Australia, I came to Australia in 1974 when I was 9 years old. And I grew up in places like Singapore. And because both my parents were in the Defence Force, I was brought up by a Chinese ama, which is, I guess, what you call a nanny. And so she used to take me to Chinese festivals, street parades. I knew how to use chopsticks before I knew how to use a knife and fork. And in Ireland, my grandparents on mum's side, their property backed onto a large farm. Actually, it was an island, Island McGee. So it was actually an actual island off the coast of Ireland.
Yeah. And
so I used to roam down to the cliffs and walk around there. And I don't have a personal memory of this, but often people say, "Where's Bobby?" And like Nan would be, "Oh, no, he's out the back playing with the wee folk," as if it was just a common type thing for her.
Yes.
I have very, very little memories, I guess, now of that.
Right. But you don't remember anything about the wee folk?
No, I don't. In the Navy, I did an apprenticeship as an electrician, and even in training there with that, learnt like basics like Ohm's law or whatever, and how electricity is generated with a stator and rotor spinning, and you taught the basics. And I'd ask questions, but how does that work? I don't understand. Why, if it gets spinning, it starts producing electricity. Why does it stop spinning? Why does it have to? And people could never actually give me answers. I was never satisfied with the status quo answers at any point as far back as I can remember in any endeavour I've looked into.
Yeah, well, that's funny. I guess that reveals something about modern culture. Like people are satisfied with, well, this works, so I guess I'll go with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
so you were in the Navy. How long were you in the Navy?
9 years. I joined at 15 3/4, which was the minimum age. And even then, I think that was an act of rebellion. Dad was in the Army, British intelligence. Mum was in the Air Force as a nurse. So my career options were pretty much limited to 3 from the onset. And I think just even then, joining the Navy was an act of rebellion.
Really? So if you joined the Army, then you would have been following in Dad's footsteps. But okay, fair enough. It's funny, I guess, how narrow rebellion can be.
Yeah, it would probably, even in my mindset at the time, I wouldn't have even considered it rebellion. This is in hindsight, looking back. But why didn't I follow Dad's footsteps or follow Mum's footsteps? Why did I join the Navy? Allergic to seafood and joined the Navy. So go figure.
So what were the lessons that you learned during your time in the Navy? Like, did you learn any spiritual lessons or things that you still carry with you that you think are important?
It helped me break through the matrix as far as brainwashing was concerned. Like, for example, I mean, we're talking in the 80s, okay? So no mobile phones, no internet. Well, technically, our ships used to have something called ship-to-shore communication, which, hindsight, was pretty much broadband internet. But that wasn't available for personal use. That was, at top-level type thing. But at sea, we would have, when we pull into port somewhere, there'd be like bags of mail. Someone wanted to communicate with you, they actually had to write you a letter and post it. And for at sea for a while, we'd have mail drops by helicopter or something like that. But while we're actually at sea, there was something called ship's daily orders, and it came out every day. It's an A4 piece of paper with probably 10 to 12 bullet point bits of information. And that was all you knew about what was going on in the world outside of what was going on the ship. That's all you knew, like 12 bullet point pieces of data. So at any particular point, if you're given some new information, okay, this has happened, you just accept it. Why would they lie? You had no way of, no alternative.
Yeah, why would they lie to a bunch of people out at sea who have no means of defending themselves intellectually?
Exactly. And so having that tight a control of information, when I got out of the Navy and recognised things through, especially the TV at the time. I mean, as a kid, when I grew up, like the TV shows, initially in Australia, so late 70s, because it was 81 when I joined the Navy. Australian TV culture was very heavily influenced at the time by English culture. So all the shows, Doctor Who, The Goodies, The Man of Bourne, it was all English, Benny Hill, Kenny Everett. And then at some point during the 80s, it transitioned to American culture. And at the time, it was like, and we would be watching something and say, I think the first American show that really sort of came to light on TV was the Carol Burnett show. It was a comedy, and it was canned laughter, and like that was a new thing too. The canned laughter seemed to be an American cultural thing. Like the Benny Hill show and stuff, it was actual real people laughing, you know. And all of a sudden, we were watching these shows and they would say something not even remotely funny, and then you get this canned laughter, and we're all just like looking at each other going, what? Just no idea. But gradually over time, and the conditioning of shows like McHale's Navy, Hogan's Heroes, Vic Morrow's Combat, all very pro-American post-World War II propaganda type shows. Yeah. And even the cartoons back then, like Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes and all those, you look at them back now, they were sexist, they were racist. Like, it was incredible like that. And as kids being brought up with cartoons or that kind of thing, as opposed, and then like the other side of the coin to like cartoons, if you heard of Captain Pugwash. Yeah,
I remember that one.
Yeah, it wasn't even a cartoon, it was just like cutout sort of movie things.
Right.
Captain
like
Pugwash
or something.
It was a tugboat, and the crew members were like seaman Staines and Master Bates on the
really?
True.
I find that hard to believe. I do remember you remember Super Ted?
No.
No? Okay. Maybe that was after your time, I guess. But that was a cartoon in the 80s, and they had like the bad guy was like Texas Pete or something, this angry cowboy, and his sidekick was an effeminate skeleton. So I remember reading it from the author of the original books. He said, well, we'd never get past, these days having a gay skeleton as a bad guy. It would never work.
Well, I grew up in the era with Noddy and Big Ears and like Gollywogs, who all the bad guys in Toyland were the Gollywogs.
Yeah, but they changed them to goblins in the TV show.
I had a Gollywog,
yeah.
So you've got young Noddy living with the old Big Ears and.
Is it Noddy and Big Ears a gay couple? Is that what you're getting at?
Well, like Noddy was like a young boy, and Big Ears like an old grandpa sort of type figure, but they lived together.
Okay,
like sugar daddy sort of type thing. I don't know.
But Big Ears was like a gnome. They're like, oh, well, that's even worse. They're like an interspecies relationship.
And Sesame Street, like Bert and Ernie.
No, I remember someone from Henson Studio or whatever commented saying, Bert and Ernie are not gay. They are puppets. They do not have genitals. They're just roommates. That's innocent enough.
And even like later in teens, like in Australia, the Hey Hey It's Saturday with Ozzy Ostrich, it was multi-tiered. There's a level of humour for the kids that were watching, but being aware, mums and dads are quite often watching the show as well, because Hey Hey It's Saturday used to be a morning show, not a night show originally. But it just got so it got so close to the bone that it became an evening show, and was focused then more to the parents' humour than it was originally to the kids' humour. They'd be watching, I'd be laughing at some things, and mum and dad would be laughing at something totally different, and I'd be going like, what's so funny? It was a very, very mishmash signals, I guess, being brought up as far as what shaping reality and what was real and what wasn't real, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I remember just one last example on that point. I remember they had this on Saturday or Sunday mornings, they had the Looney Tunes show, and it was hosted by this young woman, Katrina Roundtree. And on one episode, she said, so it turns out that the demographic of this show is 22 to 25-year-old males. And so, so how are you doing? And then someone called in and she was like, so what are you wearing? And I was like 12 years old and watching this like, what the hell is going on? And the guy's like, I'm wearing my pajamas. It was all very, very bizarre. Back to the main point. So after being in it, sorry?
There's a point.
We'll find a point eventually. But you said being in the Navy, you realized, or once you got back to shore, you realized that information could be manipulated like that. So that made you more wary of it, I guess.
Yeah. In fact, that recalling now, that was even a sidetrack from your original question as far as understanding. Before I got into Navy, as a young child, pre-pubescent sort of days, I was very, very tuned in, I guess, to outside of matrix type vibrations. The kids that I chose to play with at the time at that age, we played a lot with imagination. We would play out the characters off of a TV show or something like that, and magic played a huge, huge part in my childhood. And everything had to rhyme when we were doing things like, and if it rhymed, it was magic. If you wanted to make magic, it had to rhyme. That wasn't like childish play. That was a belief. Believed in that firmly. I used to astral project as a child.
How so?
I was sort of at very strict upbringing type thing, whereas like when the adults came over, it was time for bed. The adults are talking type thing. Off to bed you go. And so, I'd go to bed and I'd just lie down and relax a bit, and then I'd just pop out and go back into the lounge room and just watch and paying attention. I could never actually understand why were they sending me to bed when I could just come out and be aware of what's going on anyway. And there were a lot of experiences like that I just didn't realise that other people couldn't do. And that really was conditioned out of me in my times in the Navy. It was like a backward step. I became very much a cog in a machine through the conditioning, peer pressure. When you're on a ship at sea, like for example, the kind of ships I was on, we had a crew of probably around about the 200 mark, and it was a very tight fit, right, wrong view. Especially I worked on weapon systems, guided missile systems, torpedo tubes. Even though I worked on gun systems and missiles, my main area was ASW, or anti-submarine warfare. Sorry,
anti-submarine?
ASW, anti-submarine warfare, so torpedo tubes. And in fact, the Ikara missile system at the time was a missile that we used to fire that carried a torpedo. So if you had, say, a patrol boat or a helicopter with sonar, like Sea Kings used to drop this sonar thing into the water for tracking. And patrol boats had sonar. So a lot of things had the capability to detect submarines, but not the ability to attack. So from a long distance away, we would fire the Ikara missile. The missile would go to the vicinity of the sonar contact and drop a torpedo into the water. It was the Mark 44 and Mark 46 torpedoes. Once the torpedo entered the water, salt water would go in through the inlets, activate the batteries, and it would actually start its own search and destroy cycle. So that's the kind of stuff that I used to work on. There's just not a lot of room for outside of electrical equations, I guess. So anything that fit into that. And of course, the peer environment is very hardcore military as well. So anything that just didn't fit into that was just not in the scope of reality. And I mean, I joined when I was 50. I mean, my first ship that I was on as crew, I was still 17 years old. So these are the formative years of your life when you're shaping your reality. And I already had a reality that didn't really fit in with that. And something had to give, because I had two realities that were not compatible. And without exposure to what I was exposed to before joining the Navy, just like anything, your reality is shaped by your observations or what you were told. And in fact, quite often now, your reality is what you're being told goes completely against your observations. And there's a huge, a cognitive dissonance sort of angle in that, where you're told something and it just doesn't fit, and it causes this kind of recognition that something's wrong. And you just, when you reach the point where you have to ditch what is observable and what you believe to accept what you need to accept to function within the peer network that you're in, it's it's a very strange transition.
Yes, well, I think I know what you're driving at there.
Yeah, good. Maybe you can say it better. I was trying.
When you left the Navy and got back to regular society, were you like institutionalized? I mean, were you so dependent on the Navy systems that you didn't know how to navigate?
No, I think you see it and you hear it a lot. People have done 20 years or something like that. They've done the hard for the pensions type thing, and they just really can't function. But I was amazed by getting into, because one of the first jobs I had when I got out of the Navy, I actually got into sales. And the reason for that was because as a weapons technician, even though I was as qualified as an electrician in the Navy, outside was equivalent was electrical fitter mechanic with a New South Wales trade equivalent. But the equipment that I was working on, like I could have gone to the mining industry, because another part of it, as well as electrical work, also the system used to use a lot of hydraulics. Obviously, you're spinning around a large gun turret, and we use synchros and mag slips for communicating between radar systems to weapon platforms and so forth. And there just wasn't a lot of use of that in civilian life outside of that. And so I got into sales, and I think that really helped me understand a new way of deciphering or interpreting how other people thought, because sales is, and back then with sales, we're talking like Alan Peace type hot button selling, old school sales, not
learn to manipulate, learn to push their button.
Yeah, I mean, for me to win, you've got to lose. It's like, I got him. We have a say, high five. It's like,
we get that sucker. Yeah,
exactly. Wood ducks and all that kind of thing. So, recognizing that people's interpretation of what was going on was very, very shallow. They didn't look that deep into it. Whereas what I was focused on with was a very small field, but intensely focused. So I started leaking that intensification of a narrow bandwidth out into a wider bandwidth of what was going on around me. And it was like a mathematical equation of algebra that just didn't add up. like
Let's. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean you had a small, a narrow but intense focus? What do you mean?
So as a technician,
Okay.
and especially, for example, nowadays everything's designed to be thrown away. But if we had, transistors, for example, printed circuit boards that we have, this was new technology, like MOSFETs, transistors, three-way type solid state. Our amplifier cabinets for our weapon systems use CT valves.
Right.
So
like vacuum tubes.
Yeah, like old school TVs.
Yeah.
And so if something broke down, we would have to like pull out like a sort of big tray, had all these valves in it, and printed circuit boards, and we would do a fault finding test with meters, voltage tests, current tests, and you would fault test through the board until you found the faulty component. It might have been a resistor or a capacitor, and then with a soldering iron, you'd remove that component and you put the new one in. So formulas were, and what we were working mathematically in a logic system, and again, digital logic, three-way functioning as opposed to simple, basic on-off, was very new technology at the time. So mathematical formula was what you worked on. If this, then that, always, like basic level programming.
Yep.
So when you got out into a world that didn't add up as, when you're fault finding and you go, wow, there's 12 possibilities here, not just one or two. But the general consensus around me, because society is very dichotomous, people were saying, no, there's only two. I go, but no, there's lots. So I got out of the Navy in 1990. So early 90s, it was very right and wrong, my way or the highway. So you've got to fit in. And assimilation too. But back then, even Time magazine, their title was White Australia for White Australians or something like that. I'm not sure what year they removed that from their magazine. But it's like, all these
that was their slogan.
Yeah. And focus like Kingswood Country, comedy on TV at the time. Money on the fridge wog when you buy a beer type thing. It was like, these new Australians come in, have to fit in, they have to assimilate. Multiculturalism was not a thing then. It was like, you come here, you've got to fit. It was like a country full of Pauline Hansons. That was the mindset at the time. It's very, very dichotomous. If this is right and you disagree, you're wrong. And I just realised, but their fault-finding technical mindset, looking at things, well, no, there's a lot of shades of grey here. There's lots of different ways, but that was unacceptable. And that was probably the area I had the most trouble fitting into with conventional society, in that I just couldn't accept two dichotomies, like the dichotomy of the options given to me. Familiar with a false dichotomy, it wasn't even like reality was presented as a false dichotomy at the time. To think outside of that, you were dangerous. You were to be suspicious. People were very suspicious of you if you didn't fit into that right-wrong. And again, because that whole generation, they were brought up too in that. My parents started World War II. Again, people were very limited as far as the information that was presented. So I guess I got into the through sales, through various stages, insurance, mobile phones, computers. I got my first 486 computer, and that really, wow, this is amazing. I want to get into this. I was on the internet with 14.4 kilobit per second dial-up modem. Before anyone else my age was even. I didn't know anyone my age that had a computer. So a huge gap and difference of age group was my peer network at the time. So I was surviving with a younger generation that wasn't stuck in the same paradigm that my generation was stuck in. So I guess that probably did me as well. But what happened with the internet was because before then, your information came from TV and newspapers. That was pretty much it. So with now the advent of the internet and a whole avenue of more information, because you could no longer control information, what I then had to start dealing with was sifting through disinformation. And disinformation was something we were taught in the Navy.
You were taught about it, or people gave you, people fed you disinformation?
A bit of both. Okay. Sneakily too, in the fact that we were taught to be aware of disinformation, particularly, like for example, when we were on tour, or when I say on tour, when we were on a trip or something, when we left port, we had a vague idea of where we were going, what we were going to do, but most of it wasn't revealed until we were actually out there. But then you'd pull into somewhere like Singapore or Manila or Thailand, and all the market stalls at the wharf where you pulled into would be selling the leather jackets. And on the back of the jacket with all the ports, not only where you've been, but where you're going as well. It was like, oh yeah. So you can't sort of like ring home and tell your family where you're going, but the locals, in the countries we're going to, are selling merchandise with all this information on it. And,
wow, that's must have been really surreal. But where did they get the information?
Exactly. So it sort of opened up the fact that all the information that we were getting was not all of the information.
Yes. Yeah, well, I always think about how when I was in high school, they would show us propaganda, and it would be like Cold War era propaganda or communist or anti-communist propaganda from 50s, 60s, 70s. And one thing they never did is tell us that just the idea that propaganda could exist today. They never made that point clear. Yeah.
And that was what was so, it was because it wasn't so heavily conditioned. Instead of an A4 piece of paper with bullet points, there were 3 different options with the news, Channel 7, Channel 9 or Channel 10. Actually, even back then, I think Channel 10 wasn't even around. It was just Channel 7 and Channel 9.
Right.
So a false presentation of choice was very obviously, to me, actually the same source.
Yeah.
But I also recognised that this was not obvious to my peers at the time as well. So that the heavy brainwashing conditioning within the Defence Force helped me recognise that lighter level. It was like, Diet Coke equivalent of brainwashing that existed in civilian street as opposed to the level that we got in the Defence Force.
The purpose of this interview was to ask you, after getting that background, to ask you about the magical and religious organizations. So you were a member of, you told me, the OTO and the Australian Church of Wicca, and also Scientology. So which one came first?
It's actually very interesting how things layer in steps. When I was doing my basic training at Naroomba, which is out in the western suburbs of Sydney, New South Wales, Blacktown Way, I was introduced unwittingly or unknowingly at the time to Scientology through a couple of girls. Well, when I say girl, I was 15, 16 at the time. They would have been in their young 20s, but they used to like hang around out at the shops near the ABS, attempting to sort of like get their feelers into the young moldable minds.
Right.
And they had a hairdressing salon. And so I actually made friends with them quite early. I had no idea what Scientology was about, and even initially that they were even in Scientology, until there was an announcement, official sort of notice from the base, like, these 2 ladies are of unwitting character. They are not to be approached, not to be communicated with. If either of these attempt to communicate with you, you must advise your next superior officer immediately. And so that ended there. So it didn't actually go anywhere.
Okay, so it didn't pique your interest and make you want to, sneak out and talk to them. No, okay.
And we'll go back, fill in the gap later, but I'm going to jump right ahead now. In the 2000s or so, at my time in Scientology in Perth, I actually bumped into, so this is like 20 years later, bumped into her again. She was actually just visiting the Perth org when I was at the Perth org, orgish organisation. Each of their branches are referred to colloquially within as orgs.
Right. It's like a church.
And she actually remembered me. In fact, I can even remember her name, her full name. We'll just go with the first name, which was Sandra. And she was quick to sort of point out, wow, what a coincidence type thing. It's meant to be. You're meant to be here. You know, we couldn't sort of pull it off last time, but now here you are, type thing.
Yeah. But, so did you say you first met her in New South Wales or in Perth? In New South Wales. And then you met her later in Perth. Wow. Okay. Yes. Very interesting.
20 years later or something. Yeah. Whilst still in the Navy, my first rekindling of, I guess, the spiritual flame was probably in the last 12 months when it was time to, because after I did 9 years, and most people, because that was the minimum period for an apprenticeship, most people that do 9 years usually do stay on the extra year and do 10 to get you 3 months long service equivalent. But I was so ready to get out, I wasn't interested.
Fair enough.
A few things, I guess, happened during that 12 months. In that time, with 9 years ahead of you, there's this feeling, the subconscious feeling of trapped or overwhelmed, which just doesn't allow your mind to explore that further. But now, at the point, there's only 12 months left, I guess my inner growth was able to leak out a bit more to the point where I started being able to see things that I couldn't previously see or recognize, like with a scotoma. You know, you set a goal, okay, I want a new blue BMW 323i, and all of a sudden you start seeing blue 323W everywhere. They suddenly manifest. No, it's just your filters now allowed that to come in, because, you know, we can only process 1/10 of the data that we actually receive for our senses. So it's a filtering system that determines what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, which is why goal setting really works. People who set goals get what they want, because that filter is, instead of you getting a random
get tuned in.
What's available. Exactly. So I started coming out more and more, and a friend recommended a psychic for a tarot reading. In fact, even in my last year, I was in a ship. The Navy base in Sydney is actually basically at King's Cross in Woolloomooloo. So after a night out, we had to get off at King's Cross train station to walk to the Navy base.
Right.
And all sorts of local things, you know, back there in the 80s in King's Cross. And there was a psychic on the footpath there with the crystal ball that took a particular interest in me, and she used to give me free readings, and I'd buy her a coffee type thing. And we would talk for hours. And so that was like a stepping stone to expansion as well. And then when I got out of the Navy, actually even before then, still back posted in Perth, this friend recommended this psychic, and I went to, and she actually was a high priestess of quite a large, probably one of the largest organised covens, I guess you would say, in Perth. And so we formed a friendship in that area there, and to the point where I was actually initiated into the coven whilst I was still in the Navy. I didn't go to my second degree initiation until I got out of the Navy, but I was already a practicing witch. Wicca.
So it's quite structured. Like, sometimes when I think of Wicca, I just imagine, well, people just, you know, hang out and do some rituals and stuff. But you're saying there's like levels to it, like in Freemasonry or Scientology or something.
This particular one, yes. But, you know, I mean, anyone could like call themselves a high priestess, I guess, or a witch, and you go and join them, and it's just, you know, a couple that's their way of having their social life, is to get people to come over and play woogie woogie for the weekend or something.
Play dress ups.
Dress ups. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But this was like legit a traditional hereditary line of succession, of initiation. I mean, we used to work with full moon rituals were done, what's referred to in their craft as skyclad, so which is naked. So we would all be naked, doing rituals for the full moon and so forth, whilst still in the Navy. In fact, even whilst in the Navy, another thing that came out while I was in the Navy was I was playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, with a very small group of people, and well, it was secret to the point like it didn't talk. And when we went to play D&D, we had to be careful where we went. And as a weapons technician, there were areas of the ship, classified areas that we could go to that weren't open to the rest of the crew. But one particular place we did was inside a radar dome. And so with radars, you have to operate a radar, there's a key in the bridge. So when you're doing maintenance on it, you go to the bridge and you take that key and you keep it on your person, like, so they can't actually operate the radar without the key.
Right.
So yeah, one of us would just go and get the key and we would play Dungeons and Dragons inside a radar dome. You know, the spheres that the radar spins around inside of. The M22 radar was one of them. But yeah, and compartments like that within the ship. But,
well, it's kind of funny. I guess, you know, it's kind of a joke because you can see like these old chick tracks where they're saying, oh, these kids are playing this demonic game pretending to be wizards or something. On another level, I think that there's probably a big connection between role-playing and real magic.
Yes,
like
totally.
Trying to get into the character of something else.
Working your imagination like a muscle. Now you go to the gym and you work a muscle, your imagination is exactly the same way. So imagine games like that do work your psychic, lack of a better word, muscle.
So you never got found out for playing D&D?
No.
Okay.
That's one good thing we're very good at in the Navy. In fact, even, like drugs, for example, there's a very, very good reason why the Defence Force do not have compulsory drug tests. Very good reason. Yeah, we wouldn't have much left of the Defence Force.
Right.
And especially in the 80s, we were going to places like Thailand and in fact, I'm pretty sure I shared a story with you about Thailand. Probably
about accidentally buying a pound or whatever.
$20 Australian. Yeah, what can I get for this? In the 80s, Thailand. Whoa, yeah. But before and it was actually a girlfriend from Melbourne who was like, before I met her, I was very, very hardcore straight military man. Like my view, drugs are bad, conditioning type thing. And like I initially didn't get on with her because someone brought it to my attention that she smoked weed. I was like, nah, she couldn't. No. I was like, oh shit, she does. But I'd probably known her for about a year before I had a smoke. And then through my relationship with her and her friends, and she I guess the best way, reintroduced me to people that I already knew from a different light. So within the like, if you're not in that clique, you've got no idea. And if someone had walked up and said, hey, are there drugs in the Defence Force? I would have given you a straight no. 100% convinced belief. And again, this is what a belief is like. What changed? Did the external reality change? No, just what was available to me, information changed. And then as a result of that, the entire external world changed. Oh, shit, 3/4 of the ship are on drugs. That kind of thing. So you don't know if you don't know. And there's too many stories just on that alone that we really couldn't go into on here. But it's like, if you're not part of that tight network, you actually don't know that it exists.
Yeah. So, and there could be these symbols or codes right in your face, but you never know.
Exactly. And so then we take that a step out to the realm of conspiracy nuts, the Illuminati and Bilderberg. And it's so funny, like you go back 10 years to a conspiracy at the time, it's common knowledge now. But
yeah,
if you believed
Bilderberg was nobody really believed in Bilderberg.
Yeah.
You know.
And every year something new comes out that you're a complete nut job to believe in, as another year drops off that it used to be nutty to believe in, but now it's okay. I mean, I remember Nexus magazine in the early 90s talking about, like, you know, microchipping and that kind of thing, and it was like absolutely ridiculous to entertain that notion, but now it's good for you. Oh yeah, it's good. Protect you from the terrorists, you know. It's like a complete mindset of change. Pearl Harbor, you know, the conspiracy of the day, but now it's through release of information that's accepted. Yeah, it was manufactured. All the stuff that the conspiracy theories come up that people get laughed at the time when it comes out. 10 years later, it's like, oh yeah, well, you know, yeah, okay.
Yeah. But it's still, it's kind of strange because sometimes there are things which should be established as fact, and you have these, and it seems like there are fewer and fewer people like these hardcore skeptics, and they say, well, I thought false flags were just a fairy tale or something, and you're like, well, have a look at this, you know, Reichstag. Just have a look. It's right there. It's black and white on Wikipedia. You know, you don't.
Hashtag Reichstag.
Yeah. Exactly.
Little steps like that, when recognizing that there is a reality beyond the reality that you see, but you just don't know what to look for. But once you know what to look for, it's there in front of your eyes. You just didn't see it before. And lots of synchronistic meetings with people, being in the, I guess what you call at the right place at the right time synchronistically. But my universe was expanding exponentially in the first 12 months of me getting out of the Navy. And a lot of it was just reuniting, and memories. Like I would remember stuff from my childhood that the Navy had basically conditioned out of me.
Wow.
Like, how did I forget that?
Wow. That's so cool because, I mean, it's messed up, but it's also cool because it's like he who controls the present controls the past.
Yeah. Extreme, like disciplinary-wise, extreme consequences of not fitting in and not believing that the status quo within the Defence Force that didn't exist to such a tight degree outside of. Like, it was okay to not go with the flow. There were consequences, like socially, but there were not disciplinary actions against that, unless you go too far. Like I've said to you before, our society is like railroad tracks, you know. You've got a little bit of buffer zone either side of the track that you can go, but if you go too far one way, they come for you in blue uniforms. If you go too far the other way, they come for you in white uniforms, but either way, they come for you. If you go too far from those, deviate too far from the train track.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. When you're in the Coven in Perth, and you're still in the Navy, you said, so were you having some kind of cognitive dissonance? Was it hard for you to wrap your head around it? Did you resist at first, or what was the experience?
Okay. I'll share a story that would probably cover that analogistically, if that's such a word. If it's not, I've just invented it. Copyright 2018 Bobaphet. And we had an exercise. Exercise is the Navy term for going out playing war games. Okay. Scheduled that we were to go on that conflicted. It was my first national conference, Wicca conference. I think it was 89. Pretty sure it was. And our coven were travelling. It was a national convention, and it was in Adelaide. And three of us drove. We filled the car, so we each had a carload. And I had a BK Commodore at the time. We drove to Adelaide for this conference. But when the date came, because I was still in the Navy, I didn't get out of the Navy till 1990.
Yeah.
And at the time that it was coming up, I booked leave so that I could go. Of course, Navy didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
But I was just at that point, again, not long ago now, I was caring less and less, I guess, what other people thought, but still being aware of the disciplinary sort of aspects of how far you can go. And anyway, we failed a particular exercise type thing in post-refit conditioning. So after ship's been in refit, you go out and you've got to test everything and play silly buggers with other navies and things like that. And we failed on points. So we had to do it again. So all leave was cancelled. And I put in, because when it's something you can have you write a letter to the commanding officer through your divisional officer to request for special circumstances leave. And I thought at this point, fuck it, I've got nothing to lose. And I said, I'm going over for a national Wicca group conference. And it actually was like, what's Wicca? And there's all these questions. And anyway, as it turned out, one of the boilers, steam turbines, one of the boilers broke down like 3 or 4 days before we were supposed to go off on our exercise. So the exercise, we couldn't go. So my leave was suddenly approvable again. So I put in leave, and I was called up to the divisional officer and interviewed about, simply because on my original application I said why I wanted to go. And he was like, what is Wicca? What's this? What's that? And asking questions. And just we had to do some daily thing, because it was only like.
But what did you tell him?
I'd get into that, yeah.
All right.
So once the boiler was fixed, we'd missed the actual day. We went out, had to do something for a day, and the base naval police came on board, and I was called up to the quartermaster's office. And so in the middle of a weapons trial, the weapons technician was what they call landed, in other words, taken off the ship. So Division Weapons Electrical Engineering Officer was not happy about this. Like, they've got to go to sea for a day without a weapons technician to test the weapon systems. And so he was really pushing. He was like, no, we need this guy. Like, this is the weapons testing stage. And so, oh no, this is high level security. So they took me off the ship, and I had to have an interview with the base security officer. And I mentioned some books, I think, like Gerald Gardner, I think Witchcraft Today, or Janet Stewart Farrar, and a couple of things. And they asked me a question like, consciousness, like sort of questions from a complete level of ignorance. And I was saying so I was saying, like, living things have consciousness, blah, blah, blah. And the security officer was like, so this telephone, does this telephone have consciousness? Like, seriously, like, no, just couldn't, like, trying to comprehend what I was saying. I said, no, that telephone doesn't have a consciousness, like, type thing.
Yeah. Now would you say that? Would kind of a grey area.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Inanimate, animate. It's all at a submolecular level. It's all consciousness.
Yeah.
But my understanding at the time, I mean, I would have been 23, 24, I guess, at this point, and new to I was a first degree initiate within the craft, but still, rediscovering, I guess, at this point, even things that I'd known before getting the Navy that had been brainwashed out of me. And so because I wasn't allowed on the ship, I was working on the maintenance staff on the shore base at the time, and this particular petty officer that I was assigned under was asking a lot of questions about what I was doing. And it came out and says, like, you realise that the only path to salvation is through Jesus. And some of my mates, we would joke about that sort of thing. And I just like laughed, and, oh shit, he's serious.
Yeah.
So I was under the command of this born again Christian.
Oh, okay.
Bear in mind, even back then, born again Christian, like the whole Baptist, that was considered a cult. It wasn't as mainstream as it is now.
Well, which church was it, or was it non-denominational, or what?
I don't know. I didn't explore that, but like it was back then it was like Baptist wasn't even. It was like the born agains and speaking in tongues, like they were just a cult, just as weird as any other cult, and it was strange to me. But because it had the Christian flavour, it was acceptable.
Okay.
So I'm actually under the supervision of a Christian cultist because of my non-Christian cultist beliefs. In fact, let's jump right back again. When I first joined, so at 15 years, when I'm doing my basic training over at HMS Naroomba, New South Wales, I remember, like, because church was compulsory on a Sunday. You had a choice of Protestant or Catholic, but on a basic training at that age, you had to go to church on a Sunday. And I remember, like, I chose the Protestant because it seemed less weird at the time. Priests were less creepy to a 15-year-old boy and the Protestants than, because honestly, their Catholic priest was creepy as fuck. Like, honestly, like, I knew nothing about like that whole sort of side of it at the time, but we were all like fucking, none of us wanted to be in the same room with the Catholic priest, let me tell you. And not knowing what the story is now, he was just creepy as fuck. Yeah. But so I chose Protestant for that reason. They're always pushing for confirmation. Come for confirmation. That wasn't compulsory, but we actually had to go. Okay. And I remember like the hymns, and like, you know, it's like, and at 15, it like hit me as like they're all promoting the fact that God is on our side.
Okay, sounds fair.
You know, it's like, so we're a military force. I mean,
I see. On the side of the military, not on your personal side.
Yeah.
I see.
When he's talking about what's come a task with the police and so forth, like the military is there for one thing, it's to break things and kill people. It's like how, and yet we got to go to church and we're praying, but God's on our side, and all the hymns were praising God for being on our side. And we're thinking, like, what about the other side? Do they worship the same fucking God? You know, it's like, it messed with my head even then. I think it just doesn't make any fucking sense at all.
Yeah.
So anyway, now sort of jumping forward again. So after the security intervention and interviews to ascertain whether or not I was actually a security risk or security threat by attending this conference, and as it turned out, I was actually allowed to go. So yeah, we went to this national conference it was called Wicca 89. So in 1989, it was a national conference of witches. And at the conference, we had a market day on a week, like a Sunday type day type thing. And one of the market stalls, this guy was selling fifth baths or corn dollies. And I remember one of the girls was talking to him, conversation for a while. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm a born-again Christian. And we were like, you know what this conference is? You know, like, you're making corn dollies, fifth baths for and you're a born-again Christian. And I was like, yeah, $1's a dollar. Just selling these.
Wait, what's a corn dolly?
Wicca man.
Oh, okay. On
a smaller scale.
Right.
So it's like wheat type stuff woven, sympathetic magic.
I wasn't sure if you were talking about a little trinket or a food or something, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, so like in the shape of anatomical sort of shape, yeah.
Yep.
Like sympathetic magic, fifth baths is what you call like a voodoo doll. The actual term is fifth bath in Celtic. Okay. And and there was this born-again Christian that made them. He actually weaved them, made them himself, and was selling them to witches. And he was born again. But it's was like, it's $1. It's how I make my living.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's not judging you too harshly then.
So yeah, belief is fluid. And I was with this particular coven for, I don't really even know how long, years and years. But I went through the degrees, and I was actually the high priest again for 3-4 years. I'll be 53 next month. I'm trying to like fit this space into years. So if I'm out a year or two on something, that's why it's like sometimes I think I've got way more memories than physically fit into the physical time that I've been here.
Yeah. What was your role as the high priest?
So at full moons, new moons, festivals. You got the SBATs, so every full moon, 13 full moons in a solar year, and then you got the major festivals, Beltane, the solstices, the equinoxes, and the other four sorts of celebration of gods and goddesses, based on whether you were working an Egyptian ritual or Celtic ritual or whatever ritual, the gods and goddesses' names all changed and so forth. But essentially, it was nature worship. Again, different people's beliefs. You just when you're at a certain level of belief, you assume that everyone else's belief is the same as your belief. But again, in hindsight, you realise the fluidity within that. My recognition, like the gods and goddesses' names, were not as physical, separate entities, but ways of being able to, through lore and storytelling, pass on essential knowledge of nature in a way that can be remembered. And the easiest way to do that is to create characters. And so a lot of the mythical god and goddess names are simply a way to anthropomorphize knowledge in storytelling. And so it didn't matter to me whether we were working Egyptian, Babylonian, Celtic, Nordic. It made no difference. It was just, I recognized it at that point. It was all just energy. So as a third degree initiate, so your first degree is witch, second degree is priest, priestess, third degree high priest, high priestess. So you would facilitate, if you like, the actual ritual. I guess the main role of the third degrees was to cast the circle, raise the cone of energy, sprinkle earth and water where thou art cast, let no evil power last. That kind of sprinkling salt water.
Okay.
The actual building up the dome of the magical circle.
Fair enough. So
the magic circle is domed. I guess like a comparative, like with the flat Earth or geocentric theory, that you have the disc with the dome. Well, that's what a magic circle is. It's not just the circle; it is domed. So the energy that you raise and create is trapped inside the dome. So when you see, we get it through trance state, or holding hands and going around faster and faster. So witch's rune is a rhyming sort of chant, if you like, a mantra that we keep calling out as we dance around faster and faster and faster and faster and faster to the point where you literally fall over, but you're just raising energy through trance state, and that's trapped within the dome. And then that energy will be utilised for a ritualistic purpose later on in the night.
So it's like it all builds up in the one place, and then later you release it. It's kind of a sexual thing in a way. Yeah, I think a lot of people would have the conception that a coven like that would be doing spells for something, but it kind of sounds like it wasn't focused on necessarily changing the external world or something. It was more about your internal experience, like getting into the feeling of a certain archetype or god or whatever.
Well, again, this goes back to, like I just mentioned, that was my mindset and my belief. And at the time, I would have assumed that everyone else thought the same way. I didn't, but people don't always. So who knows really why some other people. And we used to have a session called Out of Court to expand the group. There'd be ads in the paper or so forth, and you'd come for new people, and you would interview them. Initially just one or two, and then you'd invite them to a social gathering where other coven members would be present, but the seeker would not be aware that other people present were coven members or so forth, and would be sussed out because they would have to be approved by them before that they would be initiated or allowed in. And we used to get some fucking crackpots coming along wanting to coven for various reasons. It's like, that's not what we're about.
Right.
What
were their motivations?
Orgies, sacrificing, and magic, power, ego. A lot of reason people come is purely on a power-based ego type thing. Whereas really, what you're doing is serving. You're a facilitator of divine energy and flow. So it's a complete opposite. And but yeah. You filter out as many people as you can, but some get in, and after some might last 6 months to a year, and they realise that they're not going to be able to turn their ex into a toad or wherever, they just disappear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they probably could use what they learned and twist it around. And obviously, you left that organization years ago, but it sounds like you still have positive feelings about it. You don't have any harsh judgments of it. No,
it was just, it was a stepping stone isn't even really right word that I'm looking for, because that suggests a hierarchical lower level, which it wasn't.
Right,
But
it's just part of the journey.
Exposure to new concepts, new ideas, new realities. You've got to do to experience. You can read about something, but to actually do is a very different. In fact, you can use that as a step into the magical, or like with my time in the OTO. There was a couple of people that I, in fact, still friends with to this day, that we actually used to do magical work together. But the majority of people attracted to magical orders, it was all about ego. We used to call them armchair magicians.
Right.
Instead of actually doing a meditative or ritualistic thing, you would just sit around and talk about what Aleister Crowley thought. Aleister Crowley said this. No, what he meant was this. No, clearly he meant this.
Right.
It was just a circle jerk, pretty much.
I guess you get those kind of people in just about every discipline that that exists. Yeah.
I definitely learned a lot more from the craft than I did in the magical, ceremonial magician type aspect. Admittedly, I didn't go that far. I only went a couple of degrees into the OTO, but it was far enough for me just to know that it wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. And it was way too much.
So you think that the OTO had a lot more egotistical people than the Coven?
Yeah. I think just the label of magician is more appealing to the ego than a witch.
Yeah, a witch definitely sounds more humble, more earthy.
And the robes, oh God, like ceremonial robes, a lot more circle jerking going on in the ego realm of magic than in the low. Because that's high magic as opposed to low magic.
But wait, what is the distinction with high magic and low magic?
I think it's just ego fellatio.
Okay. I remember Anton Sander LaVey makes this distinction where he says, I think he says greater magic and lesser magic. Or lesser magic is like perception management, like I'm going to dress in this way so people perceive me. Or it's like marketing, I suppose. And greater magic was just the ritual stuff.
And I guess a lot of the ritual in the magical orders is around the invocation of entities. I used to have entity lightly because who knows what you're playing with. And quite often you could even be manifesting your own ego, manifesting your own ego physically into the external environment. But it just had that attraction that was a magician doesn't serve, a magician should be served type thing, whereas the craft is like a priest serves.
Right.
Nice. Within the craft, your title is priest or priestess. Within the magical order, your title is magician, high magician, lord magician, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So when you entered the Coven, were people skeptical of you because you were a military man?
Not really, because through the time in there, like the psychic that I told you about that was recommended to me, I went for tarot readings. We had developed a friendship to the point before I even knew that she was the high priestess of the Coven. That was not revealed to me initially. So, but by the time that I was invited to join, I had already been sussed out.
Yeah, pre-approved.
In fact, my first position within the Coven was a title which is called Man in Black, and the Man in Black is like I guess security. So everyone else in the Coven might be working Skyclad. The Man in Black remains in black cloak, simply for the ability to blend into the darkness. Even though like a lot of the ritual was done on private property, there were certain places, like for example up in the hills of Rollystone, ancient indigenous sacred sites that definitely had like rock formation power areas. We would go and do some ritual there, so you'd have to be aware of the public. And also the Man in Black was the person that brought new neophyte or initiates to the circle blindfolded for the first time before they were actually initiated.
Okay.
So, and I guess the military sort of background and martial arts background as well type thing was like people liked that I had that background for that role.
Yeah, makes sense. So did you ever have to restrain someone or, hold back a member of the public? Nothing ever happened?
No.
Okay. Well, good.
I mean, you think too, like, if you're a member of the public and you came across a bunch of people doing a ritual on a full moon, like, you probably wouldn't stick around.
I might watch and ask them afterwards what was going on.
That's you're special. Like,
yeah, because who knows? Yeah. Isaac Bonowitz talks about this. I read this book, Real Magic, and he talks about when people have coven wars. So they're like, there's two covens in a city, and one is pointing the finger at the other, they're each pointing their fingers and saying, they're evil, they're doing black magic. And so they get caught up doing these rituals trying to fight each other, and it's just a big, waste of time. Did you ever see anything like that happen?
Not really. I mean, anything on that level would have been purely ego, as far as our coven is better than their coven. Our coven can be traced back to third generation. Our coven is this, and they're just that. Again, ego type stuff.
So even in the OTO, you didn't see that kind of war behavior?
No. I mean, I traveled to Melbourne I traveled to Adelaide for my second degree initiation, but I met members from Melbourne in Adelaide and then got a lift to Melbourne and met more Melbourne people. So I only really knew 3 groups at the time within the Perth, the Adelaide and the Melbourne, and I only know some of the people in those groups. So I really don't know what was going on outside of my own group, but I don't know, I just never, even in the early stages, like I knew I wasn't going to be there. It was just, I knew it wasn't my thing.
Fair enough.
It's more of a like curiosity level, like, what is it about?
Yeah.
But I think what I've discovered was that most of the people in it don't know what it's about.
All right. So I was going to ask you what's the ideal behind it, but it sounds like there isn't any. It's like they just want to get together and do this armchair discussions. Yeah.
It was lost. If there was something in it, it was lost on me. Yeah, I just was never really attracted that much to it.
Yeah. Fair enough. So
actually, one thing I did notice, there was a commonality. A lot of members were ex-Masons.
So
they tried Masonry and then left Masonry to go to OTO. That was one thing I remember as being interesting.
The ego's too big for Freemasonry, I guess.
Much was lost on me.
Okay. So maybe there was something going on there.
I have 2 very good friends to this day from we shared commonalities, and we actually used to catch up socially, and we would actually do real work. I mean, in the OTO Magic Book, they talk about the great work. And again, I don't think anyone really knows what the great work is, but the great work or the alchemy is personal self-development.
Right. Well, Crowley sometimes describes it as contacting your personal angel or something like that.
Yeah, there's that, but it's the transformation of self, of realization was what my personal take on it, of the great work. The true alchemy is the transformation of the self.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks so much for listening. So that's actually part 1 of the interview. There's a second part still to come where Bob shares some more information about the organizations he was involved with and his own personal perspective. Remember to follow Bob on Steemit and also check out Cryptonomics, Principles of Cryptocurrency and Investing. Follow on YouTube, Cryptonomics on YouTube, Cryptonomics on Facebook, and on Steemit at Cryptonomics1. Thanks so much again. I'll talk to you soon.